Hello and welcome. He's a movie maker who uses his knowledge of life on the streets to put a gritty reality into his projects. And he's all about empowerment. This week on One-on-One, meet the outspoken, award-winning African-American filmmaker, Spike Lee. The southern U.S. city of Atlanta was the birthplace for Shelton Jackson Lee, the son of a teacher and musician. His family moved to Brooklyn, New York, when he was still a small child, placing him in an environment that eventually became the inspiration for a lot of the social commentary in his work. Spike Lee studied film and started his first movie, She's Gotta Have It, on a budget of just $175,000 in 1985. It went on to gross more than $7 million when it released in 1986. Lee went on to make iconic films such as Malcolm X, on the life of the legendary black leader, and Inside Man, a quirky bank heist film, also featuring his regular favorite Hollywood star, Denzel Washington. Still bursting with creative energy, the determined filmmaker continues to surprise audiences as he tackles one unique subject to the next. Spike, great to be with you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. You've included a lot of social activism and sort of political commentary in your work over the years. How much does it still steer the way you do your work?
Well, I mean, it steers a lot of it, but I've done 22 films to date, my body of work, and not all of them are like that. But I think that because of films like Do the Right Thing and Malcolm X, that's the stuff that people, focus on. But I have many different interests.
So what sort of projects do you look to do nowadays then?
Well, my new film out is called Miracle at St. Anne's, a World War II epic. It's about the black soldiers, American black soldiers, the 92nd Division Buffalo soldiers who fought in Tuscany, Italy, against the Nazis and the fascists in the fall of 1944.
No. You know what? I'm the only one left who knows.
Are there any topics you steer away from nowadays? Is there anything you wouldn't tackle?
Bad stories.
Bad as in what sense?
I think, for me, the films I like and the films I make are ones that are good stories. So something that is not a good story to me is not a film I would make.
Now, in your film Inside Man, the bank heist story,
right.
It's interesting, you had a sort of almost comical approach to how an Indian man, because of his turban, is mistaken for a potential Muslim terrorist.
Well, if you're a sheikh, it's not comical,
Well, that's true.
And also, especially after 9/11, because the Americans are kind of ignorant about anything outside their own world. And so, a whole lot of people got pulled aside and other stuff because they were so-called terrorists because they had the turban on their head.
Now, I wonder, I mean, especially coming from a position where you've look at black empowerment and so on, how you regard the way American society now is divided, that, essentially Muslims are portrayed often as bad guys in the media.
Well, it's really the history of this country. And you can look at specifically through the 50 years plus of TV, the 100 years plus of cinema. You're always going to have a bad guy. First, it was the I'm not going to call them Indians, the Native Americans. And you look at the cowboy Native American films, they were portrayed as savages. Then World War II, the Nazis. Then post-World War II, Russia. Then, when Russia fell apart, now we have the new boogeyman, which is the Arabic Islamic states/countries, so-called terrorists, as Bush says, the Taliban, So, Hollywood's always going to have the boogeyman.
That's what I wonder. Is it that, Americans or people in general always need the bad guy as a focus, in the same way that people need heroes?
Yeah, but I mean, you need villains, but I don't think villains at the same time should be based upon prejudice and racism.
Do you think that filmmaking has to have activism in it? Can it be pure entertainment, or does it have to change society in some way?
No, there's no one way to do anything. And so when I go to the theater to see Star Wars or E.T. or Jaws, it's pure entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with that.
The thing is that...
But what's wrong, though, is that when you don't get the balance. So, but I go to, I mean, I went to see Iron Man this summer. I went to see Batman, and those are very enjoyable summer escapism films. So there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Well, apart from doing the sort of the art house type films, you're doing a lot of mainstream Hollywood type stuff as well. How much do you find when you go more into the mainstream, you end up a little more restrained in what you can say?
Not with me. I have final cut with my films, so once I get the finance, you know, I'm basically left alone to shoot the script.
Now, you're often described as having revolutionized the way that black talent is portrayed in the cinema. And I wonder, you know, when you look back over the years, how much has changed since when you started in the way that black people are portrayed in mainstream?
Well, that same question could be applied to African Americans in general. And you could say, well, there's been a lot of progress, but there's still a long way to go. And I think this question was probably on your list, so I hope I'm not jumping. This probably ties into what's happening now in America with this presidential election with Barack Obama. And I feel that he's going to become the next president of the United States. And I think this is going to be one of the most defining moments, not in just American history, but world history. Knock on wood.
There's a lot of confusion for people where political correctness goes now. In, for example, terminology, black, African American, so on. How do you feel about the hip-hop culture? I mean, liberal use of the N-word, the, you know, sort of portrayal of stereotypes and so on.
Well, I think that I try not to have a blanket condemnation of hip-hop. I mean, I grew up with hip-hop. It's from, the birth of hip-hop is New York City, in the Bronx, even though I'm from Brooklyn. But I just think that the genre of hip-hop, the gangster rap, is not doing anybody any good.
You know, obviously, as you set yourself up in the film industry with successes, you're set up for accolades. The same way you also can be set up for criticism. How do you personally handle when something, you know, if someone pans your movie or someone criticizes you?
Well, I think that if you're an artist, especially a filmmaker, you have to have very tough skin. And you just got to roll the punches. Got to roll the punches.
You were born in Atlanta, Georgia, in the late 50s, and just
1957.
Right, and then moved up to New York.
When I was a year old.
But do you have any memories of the Deep South before you moved on up?
Yes, because my grandparents were in the South, and something that happens that even today, for many African Americans who live in the North, your parents send you down south during the summer. So every summer, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, or Snow, Alabama. So, and then I went to college in Morehouse, which is in Atlanta. So, I mean, it was back and forth.
What do you remember of that time?
Well, I remember one summer going down back to Atlanta, and I had an afro. My hair was out to here. and afros had not reached down south yet. So people looked at my brother and I like we were from Mars. And then my grandfather marched us off to the barber shop. And we were ridiculed and heckled by everybody in the barber shop, including the barbers. And my grandfather told the barber to shave our heads clean. You know, our afros like this. But before they shaved the head clean, they left a mohawk. We had a mohawk, an afro mohawk, and me and my brother were crying. It was terrible.
How did, when you went back up north, how did people react to the fact suddenly your head was shaved?
They said, "What happened to your afro?"
Your mother, I gather it was your mother, Jacqueline, who gave you the name Spike. Where did that come from?
She said I was a tough baby.
It was to describe the way your character was.
That's what she said.
Sort of what characteristics, how did she influence you? What characteristics did you get
Well,
from her?
my mother was, she really was the one that instilled my work ethic and always was on me, you know. I didn't understand it when I was growing up, but I could do no right. If I got a B, she would say, why don't you get an A? If I got an A, she would say, how come you get an A plus?
She was a teacher.
Yes, you know, but at that young age, I was unable to understand her methodology. I thought she was just picking on me. But thank God that she was on my ass, excuse me, that it paid off.
What about the influence of your father, William?
My father's a jazz musician, so I grew up in a very artistic household. And so my parents believed and exposed not just myself, all my siblings to the arts. So we were going to Broadway plays, films, all type of stuff at a very young age.
Was it a happy childhood?
Very happy.
Yeah. Now, you know, in the early years that you experienced, you know, going between the South and going between the North, how much of those experiences have filtered into your movie making? I mean, did you experience extreme racism, for example?
Well, you don't have to go down south to experience racism.
Yeah, I meant in either place.
I mean, Malcolm X had a famous quote, you know, South is below the Canadian border. So, but that's just a part, you know, that was a part of growing up, and my parents were very astute, and we always talked about what was happening in the world at the dinner table, you know, world events, stuff that's happened, national events. But we were always told that, you know, that is not fair, but you can't use racism and prejudice as an excuse from doing what you want to do.
Now, did you, over those years, actively witness any progression? Did you see the change in society, the attitudes between races and so on?
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember going down south in the early 60s. I was infant and still seeing those separate water fountains in Alabama. But again, this country is made a great progress because not too many people think that we will ever witness what's going to happen in the United States now. So I think that's a testament to the growth, the evolution of America.
Spike Lee, don't go away. We're going to have a few more questions in a moment when One on One returns.